Homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. Tonight I am making Swiss chard enchiladas, and this recipe is from this book by Cooks Illustrated, America's Test Kitchen. And I have probably made 15 recipes out of this, and I really, really like it. And I've adapted this recipe a little bit. I find making enchiladas, rolling them, really fiddly, especially with corn tortillas, which is what this calls for. They just aren't that flexible unless you dip them in oil, and they tend to split. And so I do a stacked tortilla instead of a rolled tortilla when I do these kind of dishes, and it serves me just fine. So we're going to put this in a pan and stack rather than roll. And the recipe, it shows you how to make the sauce as well. And I, as one of my canning projects this summer, actually canned enchilada sauce. So I'm going to skip that part of the recipe, and I'm just going to make the part that is the filling. And then I've made some notes and adaptations. It's very mild as written. It was originally made with bell peppers, and I like a little more spice than that. And I have some extra poblanos on hand that I've roasted, and so I'm going to use my roasted poblano peppers in this rather than a bell pepper. And then I'm going to throw in a jalapeno as well. So a little bit of adaptation, which is one of the great things about an enchilada stacked recipe, is I often use it as a bit of a fridge clean out, because you can do it with meat, you can do it without meat, you can do it with all different kinds of vegetables as you like. So it's just a really good, and you can do it with canned enchilada sauce. I've made it many times with canned enchilada sauce from the store. So it's just a great adaptable weeknight dinner, and the leftovers are fantastic for lunch. So this is some of my onions that I grew this season. And it called for 2 onions. Half of those go into the Saute. It doesn't indicate the size of the onion. I'm going to say a cup to a cup and a half of chopped onions is about what I'm looking for here. And then I'm also going to want to, these are the poblanos. And this is probably, these have been roasted, and so they lose some weight when you peel them and take the guts out. And then they also lose some weight just because some of that water that's in them boils off. But this is about 6 ounces of roasted poblanos. And I'm just gonna, I had a bunch of poblanos left over from the garden, and so I roasted all of them and then froze them in 4-ounce packs. We use those for a baked egg chili relleno breakfast dish that I make quite a bit. It was originally written for Ortega canned chilies, which is a 4-ounce can. And so I freeze those in 4-ounce packets so that they're really easy to grab out of the freezer and thaw for breakfast on a breakfast morning. I'm also going to chop up a couple of jalapenos. These are the last jalapenos from the garden. I'm sure I'm not going to get through all of them before they start to go bad, but I'm just going as fast as I can. And I could probably freeze those too. But I have we have so much hot sauce, it's insane. Because my husband loves hot sauce, and it's what we do with the leftover peppers at the end of the season. And so I definitely don't need to be conserving every jalapeno from my garden. I'll just feed them to the chickens when they start to go bad. And we'll use hot sauce after that, because I have a lot of it. And you guys have seen I have several recipes for hot sauce on my YouTube channel. One of them for fermented hot sauce, which has become quite popular. It's been an interesting thing to watch that get spread around. And then one for non-fermented if you're just wanting to do a really basic hot sauce. The veins and the seeds are where most of the heat is in your peppers. And so the more of that you remove, the less hot your dish is going to be. And I imagine this enchilada sauce that I have has got some pretty good kick to it. I don't remember exactly, but I'd have to go back and look at the recipe, but I'm sure it's probably not super mild. And we can always add hot sauce if it's not hot enough. Plus, I don't really love the texture of eating pepper seeds, and so I usually take them out. We're going to add a tablespoon of oil. And I'm using grapeseed oil. You can use any neutral flavored oil, it doesn't matter. To that, I'm going to add my onion. And we just want to saute these onions until soft. We're not looking for any kind of browning. We'll see how we do. This cast iron and this particular burner tends to run a little bit warm, but about 7 minutes of saute, and I'm gonna work on the Swiss chard while that's cooking. I have one bunch of beautiful Swiss chard that's been in my fridge for about a week, so it's a little bit wilty. Great trick. If I wanted this to be crisp, like I was putting it in a salad or something, you can put that in a sink full of cold water. Let it sit for about 5 minutes. Shake the excess water off and then throw it back in the fridge. And it will generally re-crisp up. It's a great trick that they use in restaurants all the time when they've got somewhat wilted produce. But in my particular case, I am just wanting it to wilt down anyway. And so I'm not worried that some of these outer leaves are a little bit wilty. What I'm doing here is stripping off the green from the stem. And sometimes it helps if you get it going at the bottom. It's not going to work quite as well on this one that's not quite as crisp. And all of this is edible. I'm just going to cook it at slightly different times. And so I'm going to chop this stem up like it was a thing of celery. And then we'll cook that longer so that it gets soft, because otherwise it will be a different texture from the main leaves. And I would love to tell you that this was chard from my garden, but if you've been following along, you know that I have not had a great year for chard. And so this is actually from one of our other local farms. And this is a rainbow Swiss chard, so you can see all the different colors in there. Just beautiful. Chard is related to beets and has a very similar flavor. And so I could have used beet greens for this, and I did think about that because I do have some beets out in the garden. But just know that you can use either one. And then for these leaves, I'm just going to give them a quick kind of 1-inch chop. Okay, so our onions have been cooking. As predicted, slightly browned because this pan runs a little bit hot with this stove, but not a problem. To me, that's just flavor, so I'm not worried about it. We're going to add in 3 cloves of garlic. And we're just going to cook that just until we start to smell it, so about 30 seconds or so. While we're at it, I'm also going to add in the stems here, just to give them a slightly longer cooking time. That does smell good. And then to this, I'm going to add, this is our chopped jalapeno. This is our already roasted poblano peppers. And I think because I have it, I'm going to throw in a sweet pepper. It called for 2 green bell peppers. And I imagine that those poblanos are probably about the equivalent of 1 to 1.5 bell peppers. And you need the volume, basically. I could just skip it, but I'm going to want the volume in there, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and use up this bell pepper. It's just... like I wouldn't want to leave it in my fridge for another day, so it's good that we're using it tonight. getting down to the end of the season on these guys left over from the garden. It calls for green bell peppers. Green bell peppers are a lot less expensive than ripe bell peppers, but I am really not a huge fan of green bell peppers. The flavor is a lot more bitter, and I also tend to taste them for hours after I eat them. So I am more than happy to use a ripe pepper, sweet pepper in this, since we have it. It's looking nice. Since those poblanos are already nicely cooked down. And then we're gonna add our beautiful chard leaves. And chard is just like any green in that, you know, you start out with a pretty good volume and then it wilts down to nothing. So this is gonna be a lot like it would be if it was spinach. And actually you could use spinach with this. If you had an abundance of spinach, it would be great with spinach. But yeah, this will very quickly wilt down and kind of disappear almost, so. And that was one standard bunch of chard, which is usually about a half a pound, 6 ounces to 8 ounces, depending on the season and how big the leaves were. The other nice thing about this is if you've gotten any garlic or onions that created a bit of a fond on the bottom of the skillet, the moisture in this is gonna loosen all of that right up. I'm gonna put a lid over that just to create a little bit of steam. I don't have a lid that fits the skillet perfectly, but that'll help. All right, got our enchilada sauce. I also have some canned Mexican pinto beans. Both of these recipes require a pressure canner. So if you're interested in learning to pressure can, this is an example of a pantry staple meal that you can put together with home canned product. And the beans in this are actually from my own garden. So I grow dried beans every year, and so that's kind of fun that almost all of this is homegrown. I need 12 corn tortillas. I keep my corn tortillas in the freezer because they go bad in the fridge before we use them up, and so this is my favorite way. And the trick is you want to separate them while they're still frozen. If you let them sit too long, they're really hard to get apart, but when they're frozen, they usually pop right apart. Let's see how our chard is looking. Looking good. All right, while I'm prepping the rest of this, I'm just gonna put this lid back on and turn my heat off. So I need 4 ounces or a cup of grated Monterey Jack cheese. This is an 8-ounce wedge, so easy peasy, we just cut it in half. And if you have a lot of problems with your cheese molding before you use it up, my suggestion is try not to touch it with your fingers. Most of the time, mold on cheese comes from it being handled. And if you keep it wrapped, either if you can in the original packaging or just in, I keep inexpensive plastic sandwich bags around for this purpose, and you want to keep as much air out as possible. I know you see the memes and the articles about bougie cheese and how it's supposed to be in paper and should never be in plastic wrap, but we're not talking about that kind of cheese. We're talking about inexpensive Monterey Jack cheese from the grocery store, and that kind of cheese is gonna last a whole lot longer if you keep it in plastic. And just keep your mitts off of it, because our fingers have always got little bits of bacteria and mold that we've picked up from surfaces, even if you've just washed your hands. Although washing your hands immediately before you handle cheese would help. So just try to keep, a wrapper around it. Try to keep something else around it besides your fingers when you're handling it for the part that you're gonna put back in the fridge. It will make all the difference. I almost never throw cheese out. Well, actually, I really never throw cheese out. And It's rare for me to even have to trim mold off of them. And sometimes, we'll buy a 2-pound block of cheddar and it might take us a month to go through it. So it really does make a difference if you just keep your fingers off of it. Same goes for things like sour cream or yogurt. A lot of times the issue with those molding is because you cross-contaminated them by like accidentally touching the food that you're putting the sour cream on, and then you put it back in the container, and now you've just cross-contaminated everything. So keeping everything really clean makes a huge difference. All right, so there's our cup of cheese. This is not a real cheese-heavy dish, and that's partly because that particular cookbook is nutritious and delicious, and so it's really good food, but they're also looking at it from a health point of view. And so they're not going to tell you to use, 1.5 pounds of cheese on a recipe like this. They're going to tell you to keep it reasonable, which is just fine with me. So we're going to want to coat the bottom of our 9x13. And I've done this in a 7x11. The original recipe calls for 9x13, and it just barely fit when I did it in the 7x11, so I decided to use a bigger pan this time. I don't love using a pan this big, but I think it is going to help. So we're going to put in our layer in our tortillas. Let's do that so we can do 3 layers. All right. Here's our filling. And you can see, because I turned that off and just let it sit, anything that was sticking on the bottom has now loosened up from the steam, which is actually my plan, so that's a good thing. And we're just gonna divide this in half. We're gonna put half on this layer. It's still pretty hot. Just do your best to spread that out. So we got a layer of our beautiful charred pepper mixture. Because I'm going to use both of these all the way up, I don't care if I'm going back and forth with 1 spoon. So I'm going to put half my jar of pinto beans. You guys you know the routine. You've probably made various things in your life that are layered like this, including lasagna. Someday I'll do a lasagna video as well. I have some good tricks for that are not quite as fiddly and not quite as fattening as your traditional Italian family version. I'm going to put a very light layer of cheese. All right. Another 4 tortillas. And I'm going to try to do the opposite pattern of what I did before. And then we need a good amount. This is where a lot of our flavor is going to come from. And this all kind of, cooks together and steams and everything blends, so I'm not too worried about it all being absolutely perfect. Another layer of our chard. more cheese. And the last layer of tortillas. Break this tail up one. And so yeah, slightly amended, 14 tortillas instead of 12. There we go. The rest of our enchilada sauce. Make sure all of our tortillas are well covered here. And then last of our cheese. We want a nice cheesy top here. And that grease is just going to keep that cheese from sticking. This is 350-degree oven. So this recipe originally is at 450 because it's roasting the vegetables first for the sauce that I didn't make because I already had some. I am gonna up that to 425. We're gonna give that about 15 minutes and see how it looks. All right, you guys, let's check on our enchiladas. And we're just looking for everything to be heated through and bubbly. So that looks great. I think I'm gonna put it back in for just a couple of minutes just to get a little bit of browning on the top. All right, gave that an extra 5 minutes just to maybe give a little texture on the top here. Oh, you guys, this smells so good. And we're gonna give that about 10 minutes to cool off enough that it'll hold together when we cut it, and we'll have some dinner. Okay, so this has been out of the oven about 10 minutes. And when this recipe is rolled as an enchilada, it's 6 servings. So I'm just gonna assume that this is also 6 servings, even though we didn't roll it up, since it's still the same exact ingredients. This looks amazing. I did not grease this pan. I may regret that, but there should be enough moisture in there that I don't really need it. A little bit of stickage. Okay, note to self, grease the pan. Yeah, my bottom tortilla is sticking there. That's all right. It's all gonna taste good. You can garnish this with all kinds of things, from cilantro to avocado to sour cream. I am gonna put a bit of cilantro on here. And I believe I bought this from one of our local farms. He has a indoor growing setup that he's able to do a lot of sprouts and things. And so I think that's where the cilantro is coming from, because he has it pretty much year round, and it's very tough to grow cilantro year round unless you've got some kind of a controlled environment. Do a little bit on each of these. And then we're just gonna put the rest on here for later serving, so it's ready. Hello, are you very hungry? I know, it's so sad. This avocado has been in the fridge for a while. We'll see if we get lucky and it's still good. Oh yeah, that doesn't look too bad. Nice. When an avocado is perfectly ripe, you should be able to easily peel the skin. I got lucky on that one. It's been in there for a while. I think if you refrigerate them at just the right moment of ripeness, they hold quite well. This lime looks terrible, but I don't think it's bad inside. We'll see. If it is, I have several others. Nope, that looks fine. So a little squeeze of lime. And I am going to do just a touch of sour cream because I think it's going to be important to cut the heat. I have a feeling these are going to be pretty spicy between the homemade enchilada sauce and all those poblanos. So there you have it, tribe. Vegetarian Swiss chard enchiladas that are worth eating and are super healthy and super yummy. Give this one a try. And don't feel like you have to have homemade enchilada sauce to do it. You can buy really good enchilada sauce from the store. This is a delicious, quick weeknight meal. And you can throw in meat if you want it. And you can also play around with other greens like spinach. So lots of different ways to go with this. Very adaptable to what you have in your fridge. Thanks for watching. And if you like this kind of content and want to see more of it, please like and subscribe and leave me a comment.